All right, so buckle up, because today we are diving deep into a world, well, it's a world of prophecy and intrigue and maybe some predictions that'll leave you kind of scratching your head.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking into Armstrongism today. It was a movement led by a man named Herbert W. Armstrong. And I should say right off the bat, this isn't your typical, Sunday school lesson.
Right.
Armstrongism uses a lot of Christian language, but it veers pretty far from traditional Christian beliefs.
Yeah, it's actually considered a non-Christian cult.
Exactly, a non-Christian cult.
Which makes it all the more interesting how he presented his teachings as the real deal, the true Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
He claimed to have cracked the code of biblical prophecy, and that's really how he gained such a big following, especially in the mid-20th century. He really captivated people with these bold predictions about the future.
Oh, for sure. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're focusing specifically on a prediction that Armstrong laid out in his 1956 publication, 1975 in Prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And to really set the scene, imagine it's 1956, the Cold War is simmering, the world is, right on the edge of this huge technological revolution. And Armstrong really taps into all of that. He describes this future full of scientific advancements, but there's a dark twist.
Yeah, he basically argues that while everyone else is excited about this, push-button utopia, humanity is actually on this downward spiral, hurtling towards self-destruction, nuclear annihilation. It's like this classic contrast you see between man's optimistic view of progress and then the prophet's warnings of impending doom.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics. What exactly did Armstrong predict was going to happen?
Well, he laid out this whole chain of events, and he starts with a devastating global famine that would strike sometime between 1965 and 1972.
Okay.
Then he predicts the rise of this 10-nation European superpower, think like a revived Roman Empire, but with this really unsettling Nazi element.
Wait, he brings Nazis into this
Oh, yeah.
in 1956.
Yeah, and remember, this is only a decade after World War II.
Right.
So that imagery would have been incredibly powerful for people at the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Armstrong even suggests that the Nazi organization didn't actually disappear, but they went underground and they were secretly orchestrating this resurgence.
Wow.
He even points to figures like Tito of Yugoslavia as potential players in this shadowy networks.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this revived Roman Empire with its supposed Nazi backing, what was it supposed to do?
Well, according to Armstrong, this empire was going to be led by a Führer figure and would launch a surprise nuclear attack on the U.S. and Britain, leading to widespread death and the enslavement of any survivors.
That's a pretty grim picture he's painting. So how did he convince people this was going to happen? Where was he getting this information?
He claimed that he held the keys to understanding biblical prophecy. He connected his predictions to specific biblical passages, and he suggested that he had this unique ability to decipher their true meaning. And this is really where the non-Christian nature of his interpretations becomes clear.
Wow.
He was basically taking scripture completely out of context and twisting it to fit his own narrative.
So he was kind of cherry-picking parts of the Bible to support his claims.
Yeah, exactly. He even went so far as to claim that Hitler was still alive in 1952.
Oh, wow.
Which obviously doesn't line up with what we know from history.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this prophecy about famine, war, a Nazi-fueled European superpower, and a whole lot of twisted biblical interpretations. But how does all of this stack up against what actually happened?
Well, let's just say reality took a very different path.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we look back at history since 1956, it's pretty clear that none of Armstrong's major predictions actually came true.
None of it.
No. I mean, there were some localized famines in different parts of the world.
Okay.
But there wasn't this devastating global famine in the late 60s or early 70s that he predicted.
Okay, so strike one for Armstrong's prophecy.
Pretty much, yeah. And as for that terrifying 10-nation European superpower, well, Europe did come together in a big way.
Right.
But it took the form of the European Union, which is, an economic and political alliance focused on cooperation, not conquest.
Gotcha.
And of course, there was no nuclear attack on the U.S. or Britain.
So reality took a very different turn. But before we just dismiss this as some bizarre prophecy from the past, I think it's worth asking why did this resonate with people?
That's a great question.
And why do these kinds of narratives still pop up even today?
Well, I think Armstrong, like a lot of cult leaders, was really good at using fear and sensationalism to attract followers and to, build up his authority.
Yeah.
He presented himself as the special voice, the only one who really understood the signs of the times, and he tapped into people's anxieties about the future and their desire for certainty.
Yeah, it's like he was playing on people's deepest fears, but then offering himself as the solution, the only one who could guide them to safety.
Exactly. And by weaving his predictions into biblical interpretations, he gave his claims this kind of veneer of religious authority.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He combined current events, anxieties about the Cold War, and then his own twisted readings of Scripture to create this compelling narrative, even though it was ultimately false.
It's almost like a twisted marketing campaign using fear to gain influence. But what happens to the followers when those predictions fail? I mean, they invest so much in believing these things.
Well, that's often the most tragic part of failed prophecies. It can lead to disillusionment and a real crisis of faith for some people.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
And sometimes people even double down on their beliefs. They cling even tighter to their leaders' pronouncements. In Armstrong's case, his movement continued even after his death,
Wow.
although it splintered into various groups, each with their own take on his teachings.
So it didn't really die, just kind of fragmented.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a stark reminder that words have power, especially when they're spoken by someone claiming divine authority.
Absolutely. But Armstrong's story also serves as this cautionary tale,
Okay.
reminding us of the importance of critical thinking, especially when we're confronted with extraordinary claims.
Yeah.
You can't just blindly accept pronouncements no matter how charismatic the speaker is or how skillfully they use religious texts.
Right.
We need to analyze, question, and compare those claims with evidence and reason.
It's like learning how to spot a counterfeit bill.
Exactly.
Once you know the signs, you're much less likely to be fooled.
Yeah, and in today's world where we're just bombarded with information from all sides,
Right.
that ability to discern the genuine from the fake is more important than ever.
So we've really dug into Armstrong's prophecy, and we've seen how it didn't exactly pan out and explored the reasons behind it. But what's the lasting impact of all this? What are we left with?
I think it really pushes us to think about why we as humans are so fascinated by prophecy and the dangers of, taking religious texts out of context,
Right.
and the absolute need for critical thinking, especially now.
Especially now, yeah, in this information-saturated world we live in, Armstrong's legacy it's complex.
Huh?
On the one hand, his movement caused a lot of harm
Yeah.
and disillusionment for people who believed his pronouncements.
It really underscores that idea that words have power, especially when they're coming from someone claiming to speak for a higher authority.
That's exactly right. But on the other hand, I think Armstrong's story, much like other failed prophecies, can be a chance for reflection
Okay.
and growth. It encourages us to look at our own beliefs, to be cautious of anyone claiming to have the only truth,
Right.
to develop that healthy skepticism that protects us from manipulation.
It's like getting a vaccine against gullibility.
I like that.
By examining these cautionary tales, we build up resistance to empty promises and fear-mongering.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
in the end, I think that's the most important thing we can take away from exploring Armstrongism and failed prophecy.
Okay.
It reminds us that knowledge is power.
By learning from past mistakes, we can become more discerning, more resilient, and more empowered in the present.
Well said. And with that, we wrap up our deep dive into Armstrongism and failed prophecy. We hope this exploration sparked your curiosity and gave you some things to ponder. Remember to keep questioning, keep researching, and never stop seeking knowledge. And if you're ready for more thought-provoking explorations, check out our full episode library. Until next time, stay curious.